yesterday that it has acquired the Dow Jones Local Media Group from News Corp for $87 million. Biggest stock gainers yesterday included Micron Technology, rose 5.3% to $14.75 a share after Stern Agee's Vijay Rakesh made some bullish comments on the stock. And some of the biggest stock losers yesterday included Ryanair Holdings, which closed at $44.51, a nearly 9% decline after the firm warned that full-year profits could fall short of expectations. Volume and volatility. S&P 500 ETF trading volume came in at roughly 97.1 million shares, a little bit lower than the 131.5 million shares that were traded Tuesday, and the 126.8 million average traded over the last 3 months. And that's a brief summary of yesterday's market information. By the way, commodities yesterday, gold futures dropped to 0.62% to $1,401.80. Silver futures dropped 4.26% to $23.33. Platinum plummeted to 2.74% to $1,496. That, my friends, is a review of yesterday's market information. It's time now for more market information as we switch things over to APM for this morning's market summary. And let's see if I can find it here. I'm sure I uploaded it, and sure enough I did. And here we go. And we'll have the CBS World News Roundup coming up right after this. You're listening to First Cup.
We'll explain why St. Petersburg, Russia is the center of the economic universe today.
Marketplace Morning Report is produced in association with the University of Southern California.
From APM in New York, I'm David Brancaccio with the global perspective on business and economics. Leaders of 20 of the world's biggest economies are meeting in St. Petersburg today. That's in Russia. It's clear Syria will be a dominant topic, but the leaders are also set to work on corporate tax evasion, the future of interest rates, and new trade agreements. Rowan Moore-Garrity has the story.
It's not the first time that politics have accompanied economic discussions at the G20.
When we had the Arab Spring, the financial crisis didn't take a back seat to it.
Lita Prema is a researcher with the G20 Research Group at the University of Toronto.
Vladimir Putin is quite adamant on his stance about Syria, and he's also quite adamant about the agenda that he's set for the G20 itself. For him, global growth is number one issue.
Douglas Radiker is a visiting fellow with the Peterson Institute for International Economics. He says the most important economic discussions may have already taken place without heads of state.
I think most of the technical economic issues are largely agreed to at the level of the finance ministers. So in that regard, Syria is not going to be a dominant or even a sub-issue.
But with the spirit of compromise weakened among heads of state, Radiker says, don't expect any sweeping new initiatives. I'm Rowan Moore-Garrity for Marketplace.
Checking numbers. The key stock index in Shanghai fell 0.25%, and in Japan, the Nikkei closed right where it began. The FT100 index is up 0.2%. The Dow rose 96 points yesterday, 0.2%. Stock index futures in the U.S. are mixed at the moment, though. Less than 2 weeks after a software snafu shut the whole NASDAQ for 2 hours, executives at the electronic market were holding a follow-up meeting yesterday, right as the NASDAQ ran into another technical problem, failing to transmit the prices of a bunch of stocks, this time for 6 long minutes. In Mexico this week, a victory for the country's president and a major setback for the striking teachers union there. The Mexican Senate has now approved a package of changes to schools. Teachers are on strike and demonstrations have sometimes turned violent. Enrique Acevedo is a reporter and anchor with the Spanish-language broadcaster Univision. We check in with him regularly on Marketplace. Enrique, good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. What are some of the changes that Mexican teachers would have to face?
I think the main component of this bill has to do with a merit-based system. Evaluation will be central in this new structure, and that's what has most of the teachers complaining about the new set of rules.
Merit-based promotion, these competency exams. How does the system work presently?
teachers right now basically own their positions. They're able to inherit those positions and even sell them. So we're looking to change that in Mexico. I think everybody agrees on that. One of the main criticisms on the other side is that this bill lacks a proper training program for the teachers in the long run. You need to provide these teachers with the tools necessary to reach their full potential, and I think training should have been a central component to the bill also.
Teachers and their union are deeply upset with these proposed changes. I understand tempers are running quite high, for instance, in Mexico City.
Yes, during the last couple of weeks, the teachers have protested by the thousands in the country's capital. They've blocked streets, and this disrupted everyday life for a city that's already very chaotic.
The president of Mexico links this reform with other reforms he's doing in the name of what? Fixing Mexico's economy?
I guess modernizing and making Mexico a more competitive economy. As multinationals increase their investment, the demand for well-educated young workers also increases. So education reform and energy reform of the financial system becomes a key component in helping the widest possible segment of the population enjoy the benefits of Mexico's favorable position in the global economy. You know, it's not newsy for the U.S. right now, but in the long run, it's very important for the U.S. economy.
Depending on how well workers are educated there and economic development in Mexico, it changes, for instance, the immigration picture, right?
Completely. If Mexico keeps doing well and if education reform goes through, that's good news for the U.S.
Enrique Acevedo, one of the stars of Univision News, thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Do you enjoy the music we play between stories? Visit the Marketplace Music section to browse playlists for all of our programs and to buy those songs on Amazon. A percentage of each purchase goes towards supporting our programs. Find more online at marketplace.org/music.
If fashion is your thing, you already know that Fashion Week opens today here in New York City. Used up your vacation time before Labor Day and can't make it in person? Know that the runway action is also streamed online. That has prompted super designer Oscar de la Renta to cut down the guest list for his shows. Kate Archer-Kent has more on the social media angle here.
Fashion Week-related hashtags are flying like a blizzard in New York, and that could be the saving grace for Fashion Week. The traditional runway show may not be cost-effective for many designers who can't afford not to turn it into a branding event, according to Scott Galloway, a marketing professor at NYU's Stern School of Business.
I think brands have realized that and are trying to figure out a way to spread some of that fabulous across their customer base via social media.
Bloggers share front row seats now with fashion editors and celebrities. But that 4-minute runway show can't be replaced, says Isla Mel, the author of the book New York Fashion Week.
You really don't get the best sense unless you're there in person to see the clothes, see how they move.
Galloway says small and medium-sized designers may look at the financial cost and decide it's best to ignore Fashion Week altogether and focus on their core business. That discussion of who snubbed it might just be trending on social media. I'm Kate Archer-Kent for Marketplace.
And you know, sometimes in the fancy coffee aisle, there are two grinders, one for regular beans, the second for flavored, so there's no cross-contamination of the taste. With that in mind, there's this. Campbell Soup is working on soup pods that fit the K-Cup coffee machines in many offices. The pod has the broth, and there's a separate package you tear open with the dried soup chunks. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, the idea for instant pod soup came from on high. One day, Campbell's CEO, Denise Morrison, is making coffee with a pod, and she says to herself something along the lines of, "Hey!" They're still working out the kinks, and the price has yet to be set. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
You know, I'm just not ready for mushroom-flavored coffee or tomato soup-based coffee or, you know, a thing like that, or even chicken noodle soup coffee, for that matter.
Just when I think you've said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.
All right, Hank, that'll do. It's time for news.
President Obama rallies support for Syria action
at the G20 summit here in Russia
as congressional leaders count votes here in Washington.
Google goes to court
over a program that scans your emails.
Good morning. I'm Steve Kathan with the CBS World News Roundup. He made his case at home and now on the world stage. President Obama is in Russia, Syria's key ally, as he tries to convince other nations that military action against the Assad regime is necessary. CBS's Pam Coulter is covering.
The president has arrived for this two-day economic summit with no expectations of getting all the G20 leaders behind his plan for a military strike on Syria. On Air Force One en route here, an aide said Mr. Obama will have the chance to explain the U.S. position on Syria and assess what kind of political and diplomatic support they might offer. Syria is an issue that's contributed to the frayed relationship between the president and his host, Vladimir Putin. They will not have a private meeting, but plenty of opportunities to face off. Pam Coulter, CBS News with the president in St. Petersburg.
In a letter to President Putin, Pope Francis urged the G20 leaders to abandon what he called the futile pursuit of military solutions in Syria. In Washington, the first Senate hurdle's been cleared, but congressional support for a hit on Syria is far from assured. CBS's Barry Bagnano joins us now with more.
With each passing day, the march toward military action meets more resistance from both Republicans and members of the president's own party.
There are different views in our caucus and in the country on the subject.
House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi admits she supports limited attacks, but many members back in their home districts this week are hearing criticism from war-weary constituents.
They're absolutely against it. After 10 years of a very, very difficult experience in Afghanistan and Iraq.
I don't see why we should do it, and the president hasn't convinced me yet.
If I have to vote right now, I'd be voting no.
The disagreements could push a House vote back until mid-month. President Obama is reserving the right to act even without congressional support. Steve?
Well, CBS News military analyst Mike Lyons says the delay in a possible military response for Syria's alleged use of chemical weapons gives the Assad regime more time to prepare.
He's moving these assets around, likely into built-up areas, knowing we won't attack into those places. It's going to make the mission a little more difficult. We're going to have to probably go after hard targets, their Ministry of Defense and places like that.
Syria has vowed to retaliate if the U.S. strikes, and CBS News senior correspondent John Miller says there are options for Damascus beyond military action, such as cyber warfare.
Classified and unclassified warnings went out this week to corporate partners, to cybersecurity people, saying protect your intellectual property, make sure all of your defenses are up to date, because the real danger would be erasure of data. If you remember when Iran attacked Saudi Aramco, it actually blew up 85% of its hardware.
Now to Egypt, where government officials say the country's interior minister survived a car bomb attack on his convoy. CBS's Alex Ortiz is in Cairo.
He's a very high-ranking government official. He sits in the cabinet. And over the past couple of months, following the military's ouster of former President Mohamed Morsi, he's been quite high-profile, especially in defending the crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamist groups.
8 members of Congress are now in Egypt on a fact-finding mission. Back here at home, health officials in New Hampshire say 13 people may have been exposed to a rare degenerative brain disease that's killed one person. All had brain surgery at hospitals using the same rented surgical equipment. State health official Dr. Jose Montero.
There is no further risk of exposure in New Hampshire for those patients, for any other patient here, or for anybody outside the community.
Ohio's prison director has now ordered a sweeping review after the behind bars suicide of Ariel Castro. He used a bedsheet to hang himself a month into his life sentence for kidnapping and rape. Scanning emails for content that appeals to advertisers is the issue in a California court hearing today. We're live with CBS's Heather Bosch.
When you use Gmail or even send an email to someone who has that Google service, your message goes through an automated process. It searches for certain words, which lets Google target advertising. Critics have filed a class action suit. They say Google is violating California's privacy laws and federal wiretapping statutes. Today, Google will try to get a federal judge to dismiss that suit. The company insists the search process is automated, so no human is actually reading your emails, and they've been doing this for nearly a decade.
Well, years ago in comic strips and on television, Dick Tracy used a two-way wrist radio and later wrist TV to fight crime.
Dick Tracy calling Hemlock Holmes. Go ahead, Tracy.
Now real life meets fiction with 3 new generation smart watches hitting the market. Samsung's links up to tablets and smartphones.
Gear is seamlessly connected to the Galaxy smartphone in your pocket. When I receive a phone call, all I have to do is raise my hand to my ear.
Sony and Qualcomm have also rolled out new smartwatches. They cost around $300. In South Africa, just days after he left the hospital, Nelson Mandela's home suffered a 3-hour power outage. Generators kicked in to keep a ventilator going. CBS's Deborah Patta in Johannesburg says strikes by power workers have been a nagging problem.
One would hope that this doesn't happen again, but the chances are fairly likely, given the strikes that are plaguing the country right now, that the possibility of an outage occurring again is very, very high indeed.
Spring High